Betrayal, bouquets, and breaking free, my husband's cruel deception. Imagine finding a stunning bouquet, a breathtaking display of flowers, delivered to your door, only to discover it's a twisted declaration of love for someone else. That's the nightmare I lived. My hubby sent me a bouquet with a note meant to the prettiest woman, and that was my breaking point. I packed my things, took my son, and went to my sister, filing for divorce faster than you can say unfaithful. The reason, Amara. This is the story of my shattered life with Michael, my husband, or should I say, ex-husband. We met in college, two ambitious souls reaching for the stars. Michael had this infectious laugh that could light up any room, and I fell hard. We graduated, miraculously landed jobs at the same company, and our life was simple, blissfully happy. Our evenings were the best part of my day. We'd cook together, sharing stories about our work. Michael was a fantastic listener, always genuinely interested in my ideas and my day. He was supportive, proud of our equal footing at work, our shared drive. I love that we're in this together, I would often say. But then, the trajectory of our lives shifted dramatically. Michael got a promotion, a huge achievement, and initially, I was ecstatic. However, with the promotion came a transformation, one I hadn't foreseen. Michael started obsessing over appearances, fixated on status. He wasn't the same man I'd fallen in love with. Slowly, his criticism began, a subtle erosion of our happiness. Why do we always eat the same meals? We can afford better now, he'd complain. I tried to adapt, but nothing I did seemed good enough. He began to dissect my clothing choices, questioning my shopping habits. Why do you always buy the cheapest brands? We're not college students anymore. Anna, he'd sneer, his voice dripping with annoyance. I felt a growing chasm between us, a heartbreaking divide. The man I loved, who once cherished our simple life, was fading away. One evening, after I returned from grocery shopping with my usual budget-conscious finds, Michael's frustration exploded. Anna, this is unacceptable. You're still dressing and shopping like we're on a tight budget. You don't match my status, he declared coldly, his words stabbing through me like a knife. His words lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. That was the moment I truly realized how profoundly he had changed, how drastically our lives had diverged from the path we once walked together. It was the beginning of the end, the start of an unexpected and unwanted journey. As the days morphed into weeks, the strain in our relationship only deepened. I desperately missed the man he used to be, the one who found joy in the little things. As his obsession with wealth and appearances spiraled, our connection continued to wither. Then, I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought a whirlwind of emotions, fear, joy, and a flicker of hope that this might somehow bring us back together. Michael's reaction to the pregnancy was surprisingly warm. His face, which had been so often etched with dissatisfaction, lit up when I told him. Really? We're going to have a baby, he exclaimed, his voice filled with an excitement I hadn't heard in ages. For the first time in months, I saw a spark of the old Michael. Throughout my pregnancy, he was attentive and caring, constantly checking on me, ensuring I was comfortable. It felt like a breath of fresh air, a fleeting return to the days when we were a team. When our son, David, was born, Michael's joy was palpable. Holding David for the first time, he looked at me with tears glistening in his eyes. He's perfect, Anna. We made this beautiful boy, he said, his voice choked with emotion. The early days with David were a blur of sleepless nights and new routines. Michael was there for David's first milestones. Watching him with our son, I dared to hope. With David's arrival, our relationship found a temporary peace. The arguments and criticisms subsided, replaced by shared moments of wonder over our son. I cherished this period, praying it would last. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just a brief respite, a calm before another storm. For now, though, I clung to the hope that our family could find its way back to the happiness we once knew. Life with the newborn was a whirlwind, and for a while, it seemed to bridge the gap between Michael and me. But as David grew, and the novelty of new fatherhood faded, the old patterns began to resurface for Michael. One evening, as I tried to show him a drawing David had made, he didn't even look up as I entered the room. Anna, I'm thinking of enrolling David in St. James Academy, he announced. I sat beside him, trying to keep my voice calm. Michael, he's just 2. Do we really need to send him to such an expensive school? He finally looked at me, his expression one of disbelief. Of course we do, he's my son. He deserves the best. But he needs time to be a kid, Michael, love and attention. Not just the most expensive things, I argued, feeling that familiar frustration bubbling up. Michael shook his head, dismissing my concerns. You don't understand, Anna. It's about giving him opportunities I never had. This was our new normal. Conversations spiraled into debates, and debates devolved into arguments. It felt like we were speaking different languages. I longed for the days when our dreams and values aligned. The distance between us wasn't just emotional, it became physical. Michael often returned late from work. One night, When he stumbled through the door at an ungodly hour, I couldn't contain my frustration any longer. "Michael, it's past midnight. You missed dinner again." "David asked about you," I said, my voice laced with exhaustion. He shrugged off his coat, barely glancing at me. "I'm the head of the department now, Anna. These late nights are just part of the job. But what about us, Michael? What about your family?" I pleaded, hoping to reach some semblance of the man I married. He paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. "I'm doing all this for our family, Anna. You and David are living comfortably because of my hard work." I wanted to argue, to tell him that comfort wasn't just about money, but I was too tired. It was the same argument, and I knew I couldn't change his mind. I realized that our little family was drifting apart. My husband, my partner in every aspect of life, was now a stranger living under the same roof, and David deserved better than this growing void between his parents. It was during one of those long, silent evenings that I made a decision. I needed to go back to work, to reclaim a piece of the woman I used to be before the distance with Michael grew too vast. The perfect opportunity arose when a position opened up at my old company, the same place where Michael and I had started our journey together. Feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement, I decided to broach the subject with Michael. "Michael, I've been thinking of going back to work. There's an opening in my old department," I said, hoping for a shred of support. His reaction was immediate and harsh. "Go back to work? Why would you need to do that? I'm making more than enough for both of us." I tried to explain. "It's not about the money, Michael. It's about me, about feeling like I'm contributing, being part of a team again." Michael finally looked at me, his expression one of icy disapproval. "You can contribute by taking care of David and the house. That's your team now." I couldn't hide my frustration. "But I need more than that. I want to use my skills." Michael stood, his voice rising. "You going back to work, especially at my company, is not a good idea." "What will people think?" I snapped. "But I can provide for my family." I was taken aback by his attitude. "So this is about your image, your status," I accused. He ignored my question and continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "Look at yourself, Anna. You've let yourself go since having David." His words were like a slap in the face. I felt my cheeks burning with a mix of anger and hurt. "What do you mean I've let myself go? You know what I mean. You've gained weight. You hardly take care of yourself. It's not a good look, especially not for the wife of a department head," he said, his tone cold and detached. I was speechless, my heart pounding in my chest. The man who once loved me for who I was now stood there, dissecting my appearance, questioning my worth. "And frankly," he added, "I would be embarrassed to have you working at the company looking like this. I would be ashamed at work for such an ugly wife." I stood there, frozen, his words echoing in my mind. That night, I lay awake. Michael's words were playing over and over. It was clear now. The man I married had been replaced by someone I no longer recognized, leaving me to question not just our relationship, but my very self-worth. In the midst of this turmoil, an unexpected incident occurred that changed everything. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a delivery man holding a large, extravagant bouquet of flowers. Confused, I accepted the delivery. Tucked inside was a card, with the most hateful message I had ever received to the most beautiful and perfect woman in the world, with the most charming youth and slender waist which can be embraced with two hands. The words mocked me. I felt a mix of anger and humiliation wash over me. This wasn't for me. It couldn't be. It was then I noticed the mistake in the address. The bouquet was meant for someone else. As I stood there trying to process this, my phone rang. It was Michael's new secretary, a young girl who had just started working for him. Michael had mentioned her once. "Mrs. Smith, I'm so sorry. I think I've made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice anxious. "What mistake?" I asked, though I already had a sickening idea. "The flowers, they were meant for someone else." "I'm so sorry. I sent them to the wrong address," she admitted. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "Who were they meant for?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The secretary hesitated. "I don't know her name. I'm just asked to send flowers and gifts sometimes." "Please don't tell Mr. Smith," I called. After we hung up, I stood in the middle of the living room, the unfaithful bouquet mocking me from the table. The realization of Michael's betrayal hit me hard. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Without a second thought, I packed a bag for myself and David. I grabbed some of his favorite toys, his clothes, and the essentials. I couldn't stay in that house a moment longer, surrounded by the life I thought we had, which now felt like a lie. I left a note for Michael on the kitchen counter. I didn't wait for him to come home, to offer excuses or explanations. I took David, who was confused but excited for an impromptu visit to Auntie's house, and left. Driving to my sister's place, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartache. The life I had known was crumbling, and I needed to find some space to think, and to protect David from the fallout. That evening, as I sat in my sister's living room, lost in thought, Michael showed up unexpectedly. He looked frantic, a stark contrast to his usual composed self. Anna, why did you leave? Why did you take David? I confronted him directly. Maybe because of the bouquet sent to your mistress, I said, my voice steady but filled with hurt. Michael's face paled. That was a misunderstanding, the secretary. She made a mistake, I swear, there's nothing going on. I looked at him, trying to find a hint of truth in his eyes, but all I saw was desperation. A mistake, is that your best explanation? Before he could respond, I pulled out a packet of photos and laid them on the table. Then how do you explain these as Michael? His eyes widened as he looked at the photos of him with a young woman. Where did you get these? He stammered. I hired a private detective. He's been very thorough. Did you know she's the wife of your business partner? I asked, my voice laced with ice. Michael looked like he'd been punched in the gut. You can't let these get out. It'll ruin everything. He pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. Ruin everything? What about us, Michael? What about our family? He reached out, his eyes pleading. Anna, please, I'm begging you. Forgive me. I can fix this, but it was too late for apologies. Too late for forgiveness. Forgive you after you've lied and cheated. I can't, Michael. I won't. I'm filing for divorce. Anna, please, but I had made up my mind. No, Michael. You've made your choice. Now I'm making mine. The evidence in my hands was more than just proof of his infidelity. It was the key to a new beginning for me and David. The road ahead would be hard, but I was determined to rebuild our lives. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and tough decisions. I had initiated the divorce proceedings, armed with the irrefutable evidence of Michael's infidelity. Despite the turmoil, I felt a sense of unwavering determination within me. I was fighting not just for my own dignity, but for a better future for David. One afternoon, I met with my lawyer to discuss the details of the divorce. We have a strong case, Anna. The evidence you provided is more than enough to ensure a favorable outcome for you and David, she said, her voice confident. I nodded, my throat tight. I just want this to be over. I want to ensure that David is taken care of. My lawyer assured me, we'll make sure of that. As the days passed, the reality of my new life began to sink in. I was going to be a single mother, a role I never anticipated. But I also felt a growing sense of empowerment. I was making decisions, standing up for myself and my son. The final hearing was a tense affair. Michael and I sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, the air thick with unspoken words. When the judge granted the divorce, citing Michael's infidelity, I felt a monumental weight lift off my shoulders. I was officially free from a marriage that had become a source of pain and betrayal. Outside the courtroom, Michael approached me, his face etched with regret. Anna, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to end like this, he said, his voice laced with defeat. I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved now a stranger. It didn't have to be this way, Michael, but you made your choices. He nodded, a look of resignation on his face. I just hope one day you can forgive me, for David's sake. I took a deep breath. I'll always do what's best for David. There's nothing left to say. Walking away from the courthouse, I felt a profound sense of closure. The divorce was not just the end of my marriage, but the beginning of a new chapter. I had stood up for myself, fought for what was right, and in the end, I had emerged stronger. The finalization of the divorce marked the start of a new chapter in my life. It was a time of rebuilding, not just for me but for David as well. We had both been through so much. Sitting with my sister now with a cup of coffee in hand, I never thought I'd be here, starting over like this, I said watching David chase butterflies in the garden. My sister, always my rock, smiled at me and said that I was not starting over, but starting fresh. There's a difference, she said, adding that I was stronger now and more aware of what I want and don't want. I nodded and said, yeah, I guess you're right, and she reached over and squeezed my hand, adding that it's going to be okay and that I had this, and her always. I smiled and thanked her, saying I don't know what I'd do without you. As the days turned into weeks, my life was greeted with warmth and understanding. David too was adjusting, although he missed his father, and I wanted to ensure that despite everything, he had a relationship with Michael. After all, whatever had happened between Michael and me, he was still David's dad. One evening David asked me if I was happy in a soft voice, and I kissed his forehead, feeling a surge of love for my little boy. I told him, yes, David, I am. And I want you to always be happy too. He smiled and said, hi, mommy, I love you, as his eyes drifted off to sleep. I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything, I whispered, turning off his light. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey I'd been on. I thought about the future, uncertain but promising. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I was ready to face it head on. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that this wasn't just a new beginning. It was a chance to write my own story, on my own terms. And with that thought, peace filled my heart. So, Reddit, after hearing everything, do you think I handled this situation correctly? Was leaving and filing for divorce the right move, or should I have tried harder to salvage what was left of my marriage? Was exposing Michael's infidelity in the way I did justified? I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspectives and advice, especially from those who may have experienced similar situations. I need an outside view on what I did and if I was right to react the way I did based on what you have heard.